Thank you. I was just telling Dan, never worked with such a prompt group that actually returns when they're supposed to from breaks. And it's really helping us stay on and even ahead of schedule, so thank you for that. All right, we're moving on to something a little bit different now. Safe Drinking Water Act. First of all, how many of your campuses either supply your own drinking water from a well or some other source, or treat drinking water that you get from the locality? Oh, so we do have a couple. Okay. Oh, okay, a few. All right, I'm surprised. Now, is it at your main campus, or is it a satellite facility, a research station?
It's actually, well, it's a big water tower that we get pumped from Aquifer. It's a huge water tower on our, we only have one on campus.
Okay, so but you are drawing that water out yourself from an underground source or something else?
I think so.
That's not city water?
I guess maybe I'll have to look at it.
Okay. All right, because it's unusual, but it can happen. You've drinking water wells, or?
From everything from 2 wells.
From 2 wells, okay. So you've got a whole treatment system in place. All right, so this won't apply to too many campuses, but apparently it will apply to a few. So let's talk about it. We can't skip this one then, huh? All right, so Safe Drinking Water Act legislation passed in 1974 to help keep our drinking water clean and safe. Yes, I'm turned on. It was focusing on the water as it came out of the tap, making sure that the tap water was below specific contaminant concentrations. Eventually, more laws were added to sort of back it up and to start regulating the source of the water as well. And I guess now, of course, with the rise of terrorism, things like that, we now have the Bioterrorism Act 2002, which has all sorts of protective measures that you have to implement for certain drinking water sources, things like vulnerability assessments, security measures, and that type of thing, if you operate a regulated drinking water system. So who does this apply to? And it applies to every public drinking water system in the United States. And we'll go through this definition of what a public drinking water system is. A system for the provision of to the public of water for human consumption through pipes or other constructed conveyances, if such a system has at least 15 service connections or regularly serves an average of at least 25 individuals at least 60 days out of the year. Now, taking from this definition, we have further breakdowns to see what rules a facility could potentially be subject to. So you start with the public drinking water system. Then you go down to community water system. It's a public water system that serves the same people year-round. This is typically not going to be considered a campus. These are municipalities. These are the towns, the cities that are supplying drinking water to us. The next category are the non-community drinking water systems. And there are 2 different categories of non-community. First, the non-community is a public water system that serves the public, but not necessarily the same people year-round. And the 2 different ones are transient and non-transient non-community public water systems. A campus is likely going to be a non-transient, non-community public water system if you are supplying drinking water to your campus. It's a non-community water system that serves the same people more than 6 months a year, but not year-round. The transient one is something that applies to where you're serving different people rotating in and out, rest areas, campgrounds, that sort of thing. So if you do fit into the category of a public drinking water system where you're supplying water to 25 or more people 60 or more days a year, you're likely to be the non-transient, non-community public water system. So what does this mean? What do you have to comply with if you're a public water system under the Safe Drinking Water Act? First of all, there are maximum contaminant level criteria. The water that you're actually delivering to people to consume has to be within specified parameters. You have to conduct regular monitoring and analysis. You have to have certified operators to operate your system. No matter how simple or how complex, you have to have an operator certified for the type of treatment system that you have. You have to notify the public if there's a serious problem with water quality, provide annual confidence reports, and submit reports to, in this case, to EPD. EPD is the regulating authority for safe drinking water in Georgia. Georgia's Safe Drinking Water Act, again, EPD has the authority to run the program here in the state, and they've implemented a few other programs such as these 2, which are designed to protect and identify potential contamination of drinking water sources. Not so much applicable to what we're looking at under the audit. That's the program. That was a quick one. But important things to consider when you're doing this is, again, if you get a questionnaire back from a facility and they say, nope, all my drinking water comes from the city, don't automatically assume, okay, I'm out of it. You just, again, never know what you might encounter or how somebody may have misinterpreted a question. So always be prepared with having to audit a program, even if you think it might not apply. So when you go to a campus, you have to determine where are they getting their drinking water. Is it coming from the city, from the municipality, or is it coming from a reservoir that they operate, wells that they operate? Where's it coming? There also could be, maybe they're getting it from the city, but they're doing some sort of secondary treatment before they distribute it on campus. So that also could trigger them in the safe drinking water rules. If it does provide its own drinking water, you have to assess compliance with all of the regulations. And they have a standard auditing procedure and checklist which goes through them. There are operational and record-keeping requirements that would be applicable if your campus is subject to these rules. Which rules apply depend, for instance, on the source of your drinking water. Is it a reservoir? Is it underground? What kind of treatment you have to do can depend upon those things. So we're not going to go over those in a lot of detail. It really depends upon the instances. And when you go to a campus that is subject to this, you're going to have, it's basically going to be a big records review. You're going to make sure that they have current certified operators. Something as simple as, adding a little bit of chlorine as treatment. It can be something that you would think would be a very minor thing and you don't have to have a huge water treatment plant for it to fall under this. But if it's sort of like a giant Brita filter, I think no. But I would want to look specifically at what that treatment is, go back to the exact definition of treatment, see if it fits in there.
Chlorination, right?
No, we're not adding any chlorine to it.
You're just running it through a charcoal. And is there a reason? Do you know why it's done?
I have no idea. I mean, I just know that they're there.
Okay. And I guess I'm not certain, and I'd have to go back, and unfortunately we don't have the definition of treatment in here. So let me, but we'll get back to you. I'll get that information for you tonight, and we'll go over that tomorrow. I see what you're saying. So you're going back to well, to do that though, for the community, you're talking about the distinction between the community and the non-community system.
Yes.
Okay. And that's interesting because I see your point. Typically, again, when you look at the guidance and all that, they're saying, well, a college, a university, a prison, something like that. We're putting them under the non-transient, non-community. But you're saying, well, but we do have some people who are there year-round, so could it be community? And I guess, again, that's something that I would just want to look at the guidance on to see, because typically they just lump colleges and say this is what you fit under, and maybe they've just made some sort of determination on, because really what they're thinking about are houses when they're talking about community. The municipality is supplying drinking water to this town, to this development, to whatever it is. But that's sort of a fine gray area there between the two, and the same people are there as their employees. They're not changing. Absolutely, and that's why when you're in a program like this, the Safe Drinking Water, it's almost hard not to be in compliance because you are watched so closely, because you have that very frequent reporting requirement, and whether it's the Department of Health as it may be in another state or EPD, they're really watching you. I mean, you're supplying drinking water. It's really important. They want to make sure that you're not exceeding any of your limits. You're getting all the testing done. So it's rare to find somebody who is regulated and knows they're regulated and is not in compliance. But
I see them around campus.
so usually when you're auditing this program, and it's a matter of what you can reasonably cover and what information how deep you go, we usually don't go into sort of infrastructural detail. There's got to be sort of a cutoff point in as far as what kind of equipment you need to have and how it needs to be installed and connected and all of that sort of thing, because there just has to be some place where you stop and you can't go into everything. And usually things like that are beyond the scope of a typical audit, because if you start going and going and going, there can be no end to what you're looking at. And so usually, I mean, I think it even says in the SAP that you just usually don't get into structures and things like that as far as this audit program. And typically no, because again, you're going into the connections to systems and the structure of it and how it was installed, and that's really beyond what we're doing, what we can reasonably do within the scope of an audit. Again, there's just really, it's more the implementation of the program rather than the construction of the system. So that's usually where we sort of draw the line in what we're looking at. Alex.
I think what you're going to find is your local municipality is who you have to worry with cross connections and backflows. Anytime you have a permit issued, anytime you do renovation, they're the ones checking that, not EPA or not EPD. Even though it may be technically in the regulations, it's certainly not something on their radar screen. And so for the purposes of our audit, you know, if that's something that if you want to go out and audit and you want to just check that, I checked it on some irrigation fields out at West Georgia or at their athletic complex to see if they had them. But that was outside the scope of this.
Anything else on Safe Drinking Water Act? No. Okay. Oh, one thing I do want to bring up. And it's about wells that you may have on campus or that somebody may have on campus that's not meant for drinking water. I was at a facility a couple of years ago, and they did not have drinking water wells, but they had wells that they used in their greenhouse. So it was connected to piping that they used for irrigating and watering in their greenhouse. So when we went and we looked at that, in the greenhouse there were also sinks, but nothing was labeled non-potable. So when I asked where is the source of this faucet here, I mean, it wasn't an irrigation system, it was a faucet that somebody could be drinking from. They said, well, I guess I'm not really sure. I don't know if that comes from the well we use for watering or if that's tied into the city connection. So there is an issue because that is, in theory, potable water. It's not directly tied into some sort of sprinkler system. Somebody could drink that water very easily, but they really didn't know which system it was coming from. So something like that you should be aware of too. If they do have wells for another purpose, make sure that they're very clear where any nearby connections are coming from, and that if a faucet is connected to that, it's labeled as non-potable.